Welcome back to the How We Roll Gaming podcast. We are glad to have you all back again. You just heard us in the intro say it, but this is Daryl.
This is Nick.
And I'm Robert.
And for this episode, as we've promised previously, we're going to talk about something that's become increasingly important in the RPG world. But before we do that, what all have we been doing gaming-wise? This weekend, I know the big thing that we have is we will be having our playtest of one of our GamerNation Con games.
Indeed.
Led by our very two GMs here.
Yes, and I have recruited a friend of mine from work who has never played the system in question that used to be in one of my Star Wars campaigns. He's planning on coming. Last I heard, he actually asked me the other day, so when are we meeting Saturday? I was like, it's all in the meetup info that I sent you, but 1:00 at Nick's. Unless he flakes on us, he should be there Saturday. And we're going to reach out to a few other people.
Be sure to make sure he doesn't go to the anti-Nick that has the same address as me.
But he might have more fun at the anti-Nick. So what am I saying? That's crazy talk.
Well, no one's come back from the anti-Nick, so we're not entirely sure.
Maybe they haven't come back willingly because it is more fun over there.
Or they've been eaten.
He could have strippers and drugs, Nick. You have not carried through on the promise of strippers and drugs.
I'll keep my dice, thanks.
Anyway, yeah, we're prepping for that. We talked a lot about it last time, but just putting it out there again, GamerNation Con is coming up in Plano, Texas, the first full weekend in April. Plenty of tickets are still available. We will put a link to the site in the show notes. We are running a 3-part mini campaign that each of the three of us hosting, talking to you right now, will each be running a part of. And then Nick and I are going to be running a side-by-side game where what happens at one table affects the other and vice versa.
In the Alien RPG system.
And eventually they will all come together for terror and screaming and all that good stuff.
And throughout there, I'll be there doing likely pickup games, either at the venue or what I bring with me.
And I'm gonna I am hopefully gonna have
putting a table with Robert at a MVG game.
Yay! For today, we are going to be, like I said, diving into a big thing in the RPG world. It's grown more important over recent years, and that is Session Zero. We are going to be delivering our How We Roll Gaming Session Zero Manifesto.
That won't be necessary. We need a statement, not a manifesto.
Oh, you hush, Tarkin. We're getting a manifesto, or at least that's what makes for a catchier episode title.
This is true.
Sounds more sophisticated.
Yes. First up, there's a question that if you've never heard of a Session Zero before, that you're probably asking. What is a Session Zero? So, by the book, and this is the actual definition that I found online and pasted into the show notes. A Session Zero refers to a preliminary meeting in tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, where players and the Dungeon Master gather before starting a campaign to discuss and establish key aspects of the game, including character creation, setting details, campaign tone, and expectations for gameplay, essentially setting the foundation for a cohesive playing experience. It's a collaborative planning session to ensure everyone is on the same page before the actual campaign begins. Well, there we go. That's Session Zero. Okay, thanks for listening to How We Roll Gaming.
And credits.
Bye-bye.
Or is there more to it than just that definition?
No, there's very much more. And
we are having ad revenue on this, right?
Yeah, we have no ad revenue yet.
Yeah, it's fine.
We haven't even, talked about the Patreon that's already live.
If you wanted just a simplistic statement, I sometimes compare Session Zero to the trailer before a movie.
Or the pitch meeting for a movie.
I would say it's somewhere in between the two. Your pitch is what got everybody to show up, but now you're brainstorming what the trailer is going to be, because the trailer gives you the preview of the movie. The trailer is what our little bonus that we throw into session 0 is, but we'll talk about that later.
Which is why I personally call what I run a session 0, I call a session 0.5.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that as we've sort of adopted that as sort of how we run session 0.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
discuss
Session
our
zeros aren't
approach
all
to
the same.
session 0.
Yeah, we have that as its own section marked down. Once again, Nick is reading ahead. This is becoming a running theme.
You can't read past the manifesto, Nick. That's why it's a manifesto.
Big question then is, we're stressing that it's important. Other sources online stress that a session 0 is important. So why is a session 0 important? I think the short version of that is it makes sure that everybody's on the same page in all aspects of the campaign. It kind of sets expectations for players and the GM and everybody that's going to be there in the room alike. And it helps everybody coordinate to balance out the group and make sure everyone gets a little something to do every time.
Yes, and if I had to do a comparison, I don't know his handle, but there is a YouTuber that will take like games that are coming out, and he has this series called Wait Before You Buy. Session 0 is a
Yeah.
wait before you play. Here's the details, kind of what it's going to be about, what it's going to include. If that's not your cup of tea, then you might want to skip it.
I have an example of I was invited to a campaign that didn't have a session 0.
Oh no. Let's just
Okay.
send that straight to Crispy.
Yep.
Oh no, it's you say that, but that comes later, and we were in that campaign. But as like a player of mine invited me to their campaign, and just gave me very little to go on before like the first session.
Wait, are you talking about what I think you're talking about?
And I was like, oh, I want to play this like fun, quirky, sort of like magician character.
You are talking about what I think you're talking about.
Here we go again.
And I was like, oh, this would be fun. Arrive at session 1 with like 3 different character concepts, but the main one was like, and I even told the team, I was like, I would really like to play this magician character. And he explains the concept of the campaign is like, well, that has no place here whatsoever. In fact, 90% of what I have made here, I can refluff maybe one of them.
So your GM was like, that's a good character concept. Let me check my notes. No.
Oh, they didn't even have the data. They say like, that's a cool idea for the campaign, right?
Yeah, it's easy enough to say, that is a really fun idea. I'm just not sure it fits what we're doing in this campaign.
Luckily, I had multiple ideas, and I was like, and even then, I had to reflavor that one that I was playing because I didn't know more.
I was part of that campaign too. What would have made a session 0 really helpful there is a session 0 setting the tone of the campaign that there's going to be, for want of a better term, a lot of granular tracking of group assets.
As well as the type of characters expected for it, which is more martial and military based.
That I kind of gleaned just from the concept because it did have its roots in the Clone Wars. So that I kind of figured, but
I guess that may have been kind of like how he approved of my character concept.
right. And what would have made that setting the tone much better is I might not have stuck around. I ultimately had fun with the campaign, but there were elements of it that I had to forcefully wring fun out of it. By having a session 0 that sets the tone, it would have been easier for me to say, you know what? This is a really awesome concept, but the way it's going to be played, I don't think it's for me. Everybody that's playing, have fun. Peace out.
And I will say this, as speaking from a player perspective, on the hindsight, had I known, like, you shouldn't feel pressured to to play a game at all. So that's just a big thing. Even if Assassin Zero is like you're not vibing with it, you're valid in order to just like you seem like good people. This game doesn't seem like right for me.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then both what you described also brings up a good point. As a GM, you can say the setting, but then also say what it's going to be like. Don't assume that when you say the settings, your players will be like, okay, so this is a action campaign with nitty gritty details. I get what you're putting down. No, actually put down what you want to put down.
Right.
You gotta let a little bit behind the curtain show, because that's part of being. And we mentioned that with a game master, you shouldn't have everything behind the curtain. You gotta work back and forth because it's collaborative storytelling.
Yeah, because if you just say it's a fantasy world, well, that could mean anything. This could be Lord of the Rings. This could be
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that can be anything from the D&D cartoon to Game of Thrones.
To Star Wars, to Star Trek, to
Lego Star Wars.
yeah, all of them are the
Which-
same, fit within the same bubbles, but it's like different strokes for different folks.
Very
And that-
different experiences.
Point 1, introduce the system. Usually when you're starting a campaign, the choice of the system has already been made, right? You're getting together. This is session 0 for our D&D campaign. This is session 0 for our Star Wars campaign.
As someone who's introduced many people to RPGs, I've had the very embarrassing question where they said, like, that sounds cool, Nick. What's an RPG?
Well, it's a rocket-propelled grenade. And
But I'm assuming you mean the other one.
if you don't come to my game, I'm going to use the RPG on you.
No. We don't need ATF coming to Nick's house.
That's true. You've got that system already figured out. You might have players who were intrigued by the setting and the game concept, the campaign concept, but they aren't familiar with the system that you're playing.
The mechanics, the rules,
Right. And that's a perfect time in a session 0 for a quick overview of how the system works. A short primer on the mechanics, what kind of strengths and story beats and game beats it leans into, all of that good stuff. Like Alien. Okay, Alien, we're playing in a campaign setting, so it's not quite as deadly as cinematic mode, but it can still be deadly. And it's a simple D6 system. You're just rolling for 6s. Those are successes. And you can push and add some negative dice that have successes, but on the face of a 1, you panic that can have negative effects on you and or the rest of the party.
You are squishy, but it's because it's a primarily horror franchise, so death is expected.
Or on another example, the Avatar RPG. It's a simple system. You go in depth with your character creation. It's very imaginative and story based because it's also a D6 system, but there's only 2 D6. That's all you roll always. And when you fight, you get types of attacks, but you get to describe how the attack works. And attack and fighting isn't very long. It's very short based because it's fast paced because their strength is in the story. How you make the story, how you develop your characters, how you develop the group. That's what Avatar focuses on.
Avatar is very dice light.
To the point, like, I think even like even the base game, we maybe rolled dice thrice or 2 times.
The only time I think we ever rolled dice a lot was during the small fights or just when we wanted to look around.
And how much fun have we all had with that campaign?
Oh, I've been bugging Nick to bring a session back.
It's coming soon once we figure out the March schedule.
Soon is not now.
Well, it's going to be March in 2 days.
Now, this could also be a case when you're introducing the system. All of you may be new to the system. See also our Avatar campaign.
Mm-hmm.
We were all new to the system. None of us had played it before. You hadn't run it before or played it.
I
We had to.
spent a lot of time working through it, and I even admitted when I part of like a session zero or like a test of a game in general, be honest with your players. It's like, I'm new to this too.
Yeah, you were very honest. You're like, okay, this is what's going to lay it out. We got these pre-gens. I got this adventure sheet. I'm not going to follow it, but we're going to take stuff from it to make our adventure.
Yeah.
It's very different from me, but I felt like I watched enough to be like, okay, I can at least roll into that, and I feel trust in the players. But sometimes you got to be honest. Part of it is being honest as a game master to be like, I may not know all the rules. I may not be a master of the system.
But we had fun, and we even made Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That is the simplest aspect of a session zero, introducing the system to everybody, getting a feel for how comfortable everyone is and how familiar everyone is with the system that
Admittedly,
you're playing.
that does put, and again, that goes back to our DM episode. It does put a little bit more on you, but if you're honest with your players, they can be more forgiving.
Because now we get into the meat of the bones, the tone.
Yes, our point two, what I have labeled red light, green light. Now
Quite-
you're
Quite literally in some cases.
yes,
Mhm.
you want to set the tone of the campaign. An easy way that I've found to do that is, and everyone kind of has a common frame of reference for it, is to borrow the MPAA movie ratings. Will the campaign be equivalent to a PG, PG-13? An R? If it's an R, is it a hard R? Is it an NC-17?
We've never gotten there, and I hope we never do.
I mean, that all depends. There's a reason I chose NC-17 and not X. Because a certain industry co-opted the legitimate X rating and necessitated the creation of NC-17. That just means that it's extremely mature themes.
Yes.
And
So,
unfortunately, the only example of proper NC-17 is Showgirls, and that wasn't really a great showing.
there's others, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. But, there are people who, and we're not talking necessarily gratuitous sex. There are people who enjoy that level of hardcore,
Raw,
mature gaming.
mature, yeah.
It's the closest you can get to just the dark stuff in real life.
Right.
And that's not everyone's flavor, and that's why you need to be upfront. Like, as
Because
a
I can really
GM,
admit
you
it's not
are
mine,
the
and I know it
director.
definitely wouldn't be Betsy's, just given what she does for work.
And now that I think of it, using this example, I might start on my session zero postings on our meetup. I might just slap an MPAA rating logo on the posting image.
Not
Yeah,
a bad idea.
Yeah, that's actually bad. That's a good idea because it can also help me decide sometimes. Okay,
Yeah.
what really is the tone of my campaign, like just in general.
And again,
Yeah.
tone can change, especially if you don't establish tone. But that's for stories about like how to deal with certain things when the story changes. I think you recognize what I'm talking about, but we're not going to go there.
Yeah,
But we love the hopeless situation warriors.
Oh no, that was completely different thing I was referencing. Wait, you might not have been even there for that one.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. The other thing too is, yeah, you're absolutely right. Tone can change, and even though we're using a movie rating system because people are more familiar with that, I liken that occasional shift in tone to TV series. And a lot of people more often will compare an RPG campaign to a TV series than to a movie.
And some series do have, especially in recent years, like certain audiences would be advised
Well, you have
for like an episode.
well, if you look back at the I won't say golden age, but if you look at, say, the 80s era of TV, sitcoms frequently had a very special episode
Yes.
where the comedy was mostly out the window and it was a very dramatic episode where one of the regular characters or one of the prominent supporting characters was going through something really, really deep and harrowing.
But it's that's more for describing like ongoing campaigns. But
Right.
in
And
session 0, you are basically describing like what would be in
the
that same
default
scenario
tone.
would be like, here's your, as you said, 80s sitcom, and maybe say that there might be a couple very special episodes depending on characters and story beats.
Yeah, because even in Hopeless Situation Warriors, there's comedy, but there is still serious problem here. We gotta do something.
So probably a really good TV example of this kind of occasional shift in tone, because the default tone fits your average RPG campaign. And that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
This is true.
It's action adventure
With some
which
comedy.
It's generally light action adventure.
Tongue-in-cheek at times.
Occasionally we go into drama or melodrama, such as when Angel turned evil after sleeping with Buffy. But
There's death, there's destruction.
there's death of characters, but you have that main through line of a fairly light action adventure. But in season 5, you get The Body, which is probably one of the absolute best TV series explorations of grief and loss that I have ever seen.
I will agree.
And
If
then-
you haven't seen it, it's such an impactful moment, but it is not the norm.
And then you go another season down the line, and you have Once More with Feeling, where you embrace the cheesiness of the musical.
In one of the best musical episodes of any
Yeah.
series.
And all of this within the framework of an action adventure campaign.
A great example is our Whisper Base campaign. We've had
Yeah,
a lot of
I'd agree with that. Yeah,
we've had a lot of like fun, like general like rebel action adventure hijinks.
yeah. We've had our
Trickery.
escapades. We've had our serious moments. We've had our depressing moments with certain characters.
We've had
And
characters that had to go through like a full depression arc and was possessed by evil, and the whole time when one character had to reveal themselves as a traitor, and they weren't actually a traitor, but everyone felt betrayed.
and one of our characters is near the end of basically a finding himself character arc.
Also, dealing with like ships being thrown around by a sentient piece of armor and capturing grand admirals on the average.
And the one character that does not have a secret that is trying to unravel all the other secrets.
Honestly, I think that does fit the example of you never know what you're gonna get, but it's all part of the same story. But none of it feels like it's disconnected because it's all sort of wrapped around that stuff.
Yeah, it's always in the one central location. That helps too.
Now, this setting of tone is not a one-way street. It's not the GM getting up and lecturing everyone about this is the tone of the game. Another thing that you want to do here is find out if there's subject matter that any of the players might object to.
Exactly.
And any and all topics are fair game for a discussion like this because everyone has their own trigger issues and what
Their
might
own
seem
objections.
Right,
Or level of objection.
what might seem trivial to one player could be really important and a no-go topic for another player. And we've mentioned in several episodes that yes, it's fun to listen to RPG horror stories, but too many campaigns generate a horror story by not having these limits and boundaries in place.
And
And
I'll admit,
or ones that
I've
go with the
Mhm.
okay, you may object it, but the majority is fine, so majority rules.
Right.
But sometimes there was, and you were part of that campaign, but I can't recall if you were exactly for that. So again, not to make this a horror story, but there was a character and player that did a torture scene for an enemy combatant. And it was like, okay, I'll let them go. But they were a little bit too descriptive for the players. And at that point, I said, for that campaign, after that, we are not going to do descriptive torture scenes.
Yeah, I've heard this story because you said the player really went into character.
Well, the player, and it felt like less like, oh, he's in character. Like, no, he's digging back into his. That's a whole story.
Yeah, this was turning into. Is there something you need to tell us?
But we've
I-
done torture scenes since, but I've since like been like, okay, we're just doing it into the sense of like, okay, at a certain point we cut to black and we let the dice decide.
Yeah, because going back to Wizard Base, my character was in a torture scene, but it was more fade to black, come back. I look beat up and dehydrated rather than you go in and say everything that happened to my character.
Given just the inherent nature of Walking Dead, in my Walking Dead campaign, there are moments that I know I am probably sneaking right up on some people's boundaries, but I try to leave everything implied because this is a world that has become horrible because it's Walking Dead.
And on top of that, for how I run Alien, is it body horror, gruesome gore, and death. If I had to say, like, if you wanted to, like, put a hard R on how I run Alien, it is that's part of the very genre, and I'm trying to capture that. It's going to be
Yes.
gross. It's going to be disgusting, and the offspring will come for you, Robert, one day.
And I try to do much the same with Walking Dead because anyone familiar with the TV series, let alone the comic series, knows that yes, you have this post-apocalyptic survival storyline that is the backbone of the series, and every so often as the characters get into a new location, they see things that they're like, oh, that happened here.
Yeah. And then, further down the seasons, it went from tyrant to cannibals to basically people going back to the primal era. All this
One of the most
stuff.
All of which was in the comic.
Heck, one of the most fascinating looks at that is the Fallout TV show. If you haven't watched it, it's like it has like a family that decided to end themselves before the bombs drop, but also has wacky stuff as well
Because it's Fallout.
because it's Fallout. But you can do the inverse. You could have like a wacky, fun adventure and have serious moments, and you can have serious moments in what would be more wacky and silly franchise. But you
I
have
think
to understand and make the metric between you and the players and what you feel comfortable with.
if it were translated into RPGs, I know what would be an NC-17 game. The Boys.
Yeah,
The Boys would be an NC-17 game.
Oh, very much so. Yes, very
Yeah.
much. Probably Invincible
Just a-
too. Well, maybe Invincible would be hard R.
Invincible would probably be closer hard R because of the bend towards like the storyline and characters. The Boys is the tips over that edge and relishes in it.
I don't know if either of you have seen Free League is in the next month or two launching a Kickstarter for an Invincible RPG. It's Free League. I'm backing it.
It's Free League, yeah. Like
It's Free League, and it's a property I like. I'm backing it.
and they've been batting 10 out of 10s every
Fair
single
enough, Nick.
time.
Fair enough, Nick and Daryl. Fair enough.
Back on
I'm not
on
sure if
track
I would
again.
run one, but it's like I'll at least support it.
Back on track again, though. If you do have a campaign that is dealing with a lot of mature themes and might have some pretty serious red lights, you might also want to consider some kind of system that lets players signal that they're getting uncomfortable or that something has crossed the line for them.
I abandoned it because I felt it was a bit too juvenile, but I used to have these two lightsabers, one red one and one blue one that you could put on like your finger, like finger pointers. If you feel like someone is going a bit too far, you put on the red one and you point at them. Or if someone says like they want to like make a point, they put on the blue one on their finger and they raise it up. That wasn't a great system, but it gets into. It was like when I was starting out at DMing.
And a system like that can be as simple as what you did. It can be as simple as just speaking up. There could be some kind of physical indicator like the lightsabers, just maybe a little flags or whatever. When we kicked off Robert's Cyberpunk campaign, I found a Wi-Fi enabled table light that can change colors
It's
and
really cool.
distributed the control link to everyone because, especially at the very beginning, we had some brand new players to the group. So it's always conceivable
And
that
Cyberpunk can very much run the gambit up to even exceed to NC-17, but can still be popular into like R PG-13 range.
Yes.
Right.
And I
And
definitely knew that going in because I was like, okay, I'm gonna play it like Cyberpunk. It is not gonna be a fun. It's a fun world, but it's not a fun world for your players.
And there's a lot of things that even you are personally uncomfortable with elements of it.
and it's entirely possible when you do have new players in the mix, or if we go back a couple episodes, if you have a brand new group of players, most of whom may not know one another, they may not feel comfortable speaking up. They might want to be anonymous. And so that light, when we play Cyberpunk, it starts off on green. Everybody has the link to control it. So they can log in on their phone. And if they're saying, whoa, 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 this is getting too much, they can change the color of that light to red. Hasn't happened yet.
No, because I'm
Nobody's,
trying to.
no,
I'm trying to adhere to everyone's wishes.
yeah.
Probably down the line there may be a time, but we'll see.
Just to hit back onto DMs to feel like don't feel like this is like a limit on you in your storytelling. You are in a collaborative storytelling environment, so you do have to sacrifice some control to that, but it's ultimately for the betterment of your players. If they feel comfortable exploring the world that you make, they're going to want to explore it more. They want to do more. They'll push limits more, but if they hit a limit they don't like, then they're going to not really like the place they're going.
Right. I would say of all of the elements of a session 0 that we're going to discuss, this is the one that you don't want to rush through.
Yes, because we can say this is the one that causes the most horror stories.
The most horror stories,
Trust me.
the most conflict between not characters but players as
People, as DM player relations is where this breaks down.
Yes, because you're
Limits
basically because either the player or the DM is basically telling the other people, "I get this bothers you, but honestly, I don't care."
or the player excuses it and usually uses a lot of similar excuses. But if the DM accepts it, then that's a red flag for the players in that group to be like, well, then that's not a good environment. As much as we like to idealize our current amount of Session Zeros, take as much time as you need. If it needs to be like this part of it, working that stuff out, that can be the whole Session Zero.
Yeah, because because at least with us, because we know our players very good. We can tell what's good and what isn't good just because we know these people.
And
We've known
even
these
if new
people for
ones, we have
years,
enough people to convey that quickly
and that's
to a
why
new
we're
player.
able to do this partial gameplay during it. But if you need the whole time to just sit down, take 6 hours to discuss the place, figure out the do's and don'ts, do it.
It will save you immense headaches later.
Now, have we gotten all of the deep, super serious parts of session 0 out of the way?
Yes.
I believe we have. I think it's time for a tone shift.
It's time for a tone shift, not just in the game, not just in the session 0, but in our conversation. Next up, character creation.
Now this is what normally,
This is going to take usually a third or half the time.
Yeah.
depending on how much you know about the people, how much they know about the system.
Yeah.
Honestly, this could be the complete antithesis of what we said about how it's time for the tone and stuff. This could, in fact, be the lion's share of the session 0.
Right.
Exactly.
And it's perfectly fine for players, especially ones who are familiar with the system and familiar with the group that they're playing with, to come in with a character or several characters to session 0, but it's also fine and sometimes expected and almost always a lot of fun for all or most of the party to build their characters as a group.
I've never policed it, but I honestly, for certain campaigns I'm planning for the future, I would probably ask you guys to make characters as a group in the future for ideas I have.
What I tend to do for your games, Nick, is I have a character idea. Depending on the system, I'll build it out, but I don't have it set in stone for myself until we get into the session 0.
Or I'll think of an idea of like, okay, this is
Oh
what
yeah,
he
not
wants to
policing
do,
ideas.
and this is what I'm thinking I want to do in this setting.
But there
Yeah.
are some that I am thinking of being I'd prefer you all work together.
No, we get that. We're just saying that there's a middle ground too between those players who come in with, I have 3 characters all ready to go. Which one do you want me to use? And coming in with absolutely nothing set up. There's a middle ground.
But also part of a session 0 is you got to prepare for someone you
Yeah.
either you know or don't know coming up and saying so what do I do?
Yeah.
Or you could have that player that comes in and says, okay, here's my character. When I die, this is my next character. When I die again, this is my next character.
But more
Nick,
interesting is
You know who you are.
You know who you are, Nick.
very, very, very sneaky of you to say that. But as I said, we do get new individuals, especially using sites like Meetup or Roll20 and other sort of online sites as well. You occasionally find a rando that wants to join in and has no knowledge and literally is tabula rasa. Just
Yeah.
Can you pass me a character sheet? And that should not be the biggest stumbling block.
Yeah, and I think the most recent example we all have is August.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because August will come in and be like, okay, this is what we're playing. Can I see the book? Okay, I'll do this. And he even asked in Cyberpunk if you ever want to come back. And he was like, okay, what my handle name? What's a good handle name? And I was like, well, these are some of the examples they gave. And he's like, yeah, I'll take that one.
As a DM, you should never be afraid to have a new player, especially at Session 0. That's honestly the best time to have a newbie come in.
I'm thinking in particular, Nick, in terms of the character creation parts of things and trying to balance out the group and new players versus experienced players and players who know one another versus who don't want to know one another.
Well, it's all part of that.
What I was about to say is I'm thinking specifically of, in my head, of the most recent time you had a session 0 for the Cursed Uprising campaign.
Oh yeah.
And the reason I say that is, I don't remember if you were there for that or not, Robert, but
I
I
wasn't
remember
in
he was. He
Uprising.
wasn't in Robert. He
I
hasn't
didn't.
been to Uprising.
There were 9 people at session 0. Half of them were brand new to the group. Half of them had never been to one of our games before. Nick can attest to this. A lot of us who were experienced players kind of took a step back as the new players were creating their characters, because at that point, most of us had played a lot of the different character types in Star Wars. And these new players were coming in, really excited. Carrying over from a previous attempt at Uprising, I had a particular character and I had the group's ship. Nick let me just bring the ship on over. One of the other new players is like, I want to be the pilot. I want to be the pilot. So I stepped back. I told her, hey, you know what? That's awesome. You take smuggler pilot if you want. I will take smuggler scoundrel. I own the ship, but you fly it for me. Yeah, that's great. And we had that kind of ebb and flow to help everyone slot into the positions that they wanted, the kind of character that they
Now,
wanted.
admittedly, I didn't necessarily want. I didn't say this because I've been rude. I didn't want 9 players, and also knew that 9 players would be is too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, but how long did that 9 players last, Nick? The 9 players lasted session 0.
Yes.
And I can attest to this because I've had 2 session 0s. One of them I had 9, another one I had 11. And I was internally screaming like, why?
Well, I assume it's just the Robert charm.
Well, we'll test it when I unveil my Legend of the Five Rings campaign later. We'll see if it still holds.
If we get over 6, I'm correct. That'd be 3 for 3.
I'll take it, because you were right, Daryl. That one with 11 people dwindled down to 6 or 5 the next session.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's an ideal number. It's like,
Yes, very much so.
Most of the new players we never saw or heard from again. And drifting towards horror story things, the rest of us, once the new players left, the rest of us did not communicate effectively as to how we were going to redistribute some of the essential tasks
which
within the group,
caused
and that did
conflict.
lead to player conflict. When that happens, it's worth having a refresh
Yeah,
of some of the session 0 things, just to make sure that everyone is still on the same page.
but part of character creation is that balancing, especially
Yeah.
initially. Like, there's plenty of games that have like that you can multi-class, you can go into different careers, you can follow different tech trees. So everyone can follow, but when you're doing Assassin's Zero, you get that moment where everyone's like, okay, here's where I'm going to start as. That helps the DM and helps the players know, like, okay, this is my spot where I need to go. I suppose so. Like, it starts everyone on an even playing field.
Yeah, and Daryl's example with the woman who wanted to be the pilot, even though he had the ship, Daryl could have just said, okay, but I'm also a pilot, kind of, and then they're just 2 roles of the same thing. But Daryl points to you. You were mature enough to say, all right, then I'll go into Scoundrel.
Spoiler alert, that pilot role is where the conflict came in, where the player conflict came in.
We sensed that, and part of that was because we were part of the teething issues of being online.
Yeah. It was shortly after session 0 that the world shut down.
Which
And I
led
came
to,
in the picture.
well, you're one of the good examples of that, because, and the other ones is like players that were used to playing in person didn't get used to playing online.
This whole thing of working on characters together can help balance out the roles and the skills among the group, but don't tell the players this, but if they're listening to this, I guess it's too late. It also kind of works as some pre-game team building, which is always a plus, especially if there's a lot of members of the group who aren't familiar with one another.
Oh, they have like something that they
Yes,
can
very much so.
latch onto, ideas. Like even the secret to the DMs, like if you're seeing them working on the characters and they're like coming up with ideas, you could like see the little idea like how they're connected. That might be a secret tool that you can use later.
Yeah, but it helps them. They're not playing yet, but they're already becoming a team because they're bouncing ideas off of one another and coordinating who's going to do what.
Who's holding the big gun? Who's being the talker? Who's the sneaky one?
Who's the getaway driver?
Even if they don't even like talk with each other, if they're all in the same room, their hearing is like, okay, that person's specking into this, they're putting points into that, and like, well, I want to make sure that we have this in here.
Yeah, and that's
Right,
why I
and-
want to give kudos to The Walking Dead, because they understood that and went the distance with the roles you can be as a survivor. Because it's very obvious to players. Okay, if you're the homemaker, you kind of keep the group. Get the outcast, you're the good sneaker. If you're the soldier, you're going to be the fighter. If you're the doctor, you're the healer. And just how you take all those characters, bring them into a group, and help survive this apocalypse.
Yeah, like, and that's kind of the makeup. Like, if your average D&D group is sneaky rogue, strong fighting person, be them barbarian or fighter or pious knight, someone that can heal with magic, or someone that can fire magic missiles.
Now everyone has their characters ready. And here's where we come into our personal twist, if you will, on
The
Session Zero.
session 0.5.
The one where everyone thinks we're done, but you're like, about that.
Again, there's no problem with you taking as much time as you want on these previously established points. You could honestly, and some may even advocate for like having like 2 session zeros if you need to like make everything work together. There's no
Yeah, there's no right or wrong way.
You're not going to find our twist in most of online Session Zero guide that I've seen.
Or any of the official books that say it.
Right. But what we like to do is we do like to have a little bit of actual gameplay in our Session Zero to close it out. Think of it as kind of a prologue to the campaign. You've just spent a couple of hours doing, for want of a better term, paperwork and administrative tasks.
Paperwork, as well as like discussing triggers and problems and like setting boundaries and explaining the lore and the world and
You set the world, made the characters, set up the
talked about the
goalposts
system.
on what to do and what not to do.
Right. So how about at this point, we all do what we came here to do, even if just for a little bit, and roll some dice.
Talk and
Make a
in
story.
exaggerated voices in a fantasy world.
Now, I usually try not to do anything especially major. You do the perfunctory getting the band together meeting if they're not an existing group already. If it is an existing group of characters, you're establishing where they're coming from and where they're going, that kind of thing.
Yeah, or it's a group by circumstances.
Yeah. And
it's what I would call, like, for video game people, it's the tutorial level.
Yeah. You give them a relatively low stakes combat encounter. And I say that it's a relatively low stakes combat encounter, and the last Session Zero that I ran for Walking Dead, I killed Nick in Session Zero.
And then my first Session Zero, and in my first Session Zero, they were escaping a prison ship that was hurtling towards the shield gate and would kill them. Totally low stakes.
But the idea is to basically like have them interact with each other in character, have them make checks, have them have a little bit of combat where they can test out those fancy abilities or skills that they thought like, oh, that's a lot better than I thought it would be in actual rolling. Have them roll the dice and to like explain the system like an hour or or 5 ago. So I'm like, oh, that's what he means when it add in this modifier, or that's what that dice face means.
Yeah, it's a great way to let the players test drive their characters that they just made.
Yeah, the beautiful show, don't tell.
Yeah.
And it's like, at the end of that, like they could be like, oh, that's great, or they'd be like, maybe this isn't the character I want to play.
And
But I
even
don't
on
want
a
to step on, but that could still fit the similar role in the group. Like it also lets you see, like, oh, we've all played different types, and like that's how those interact with each other. It's like maybe I want to be something similar to that, but I don't want to step on someone's toes.
And also, if the GM in the group is new to a system and they do some rolls, they may even find, okay, I know the rules say you need, this gives you this or this does this, but I don't think it meshes well, so we'll forgo that rule in the future.
Right, we're going to house rule this.
Yeah, we're gonna house rule this.
And house rules are best. Like some people say, like that should be in Assassin's Zero, and that makes sense to a degree. But house rules can also prop up at any time, be it from players or GMs or just in general. So there's no hard limit to it. That could be a discussion in of itself.
It's something that I've picked up from you, Nick. You're the first GM that I have ever seen do a session 0 that way, and I loved it, and so I have borrowed it for every campaign that I have run since, be it at your place or at mine.
And I'll give my explanation for it. I had played in several games before, done the equivalent of a Session Zero, even though that wasn't a term when I was learning the game. It's relatively recent. Probably has been done before, but not in anyone that I played with before. Session 1, we're building characters and we're discussing the lore, the concepts and stuff like that, taking notes, and it's like, and we leave, and it's like, okay, I'm ready to play though. I talked with these guys for about like 3.5 hours, and it's like,
Nick, were you channeling your inner Ian Malcolm? You are going to actually play a role-playing game at your role-playing game session, right?
basically, it was like you have the dice right there, and oh, you're just packing those up right now, and we're leaving now. It's like, so I'm just gonna hold on to this till 3 weeks later and be like, oh, I want to swing the sword.
You just gave the perfect segue to...
But that's the reason why I do my Assassin's Zeros that I do. It's like, no, you spent your time doing the homework, or you listened to the lectures, you did the stuff, you spent this time with these people, probably ate pizza with them, because it's a role playing game. You always eat pizza with a role playing group.
Pizza or chicken.
But either way, you want to play around with this new character. You want to interact with Krogdot the Barbarian or Raphael the Jedi Knight, and like talk with them and see them like do something cool and fire your blaster or fire a fireball.
Or
Well,
Phil
just-
the accountant.
Yeah. Either way, just live in that world that you spent together with these people, like working to it. Because it's also good for you guys to learn the system, especially if you're new, and encourage you for, as you said, what comes next.
We've hitched you on, made sure all the safeties are good. Now get on that roller coaster.
And next comes the bane of most RPGs' existence.
Don't say it.
The greatest killer of the murderer of all campaigns.
We gotta say it, Robert. Scheduling.
Oh,
So,
psychic damage.
before everyone leaves session 0, coordinate scheduling the next session. Set the expectation for how frequently you expect the games to run, and coordinate together to get an idea of everyone's availability to make sure all of that gels.
Get them schedules.
There's going to be those people online are going to put in the comments and be like, oh, well, why didn't you just put that in the invitation? It's like,
Because if we are meeting for the first time for an RPG, I don't know what Nick's schedule is or Robert's schedule is, and neither of you know what my schedule is.
Also, no one knows everyone's schedule. Everyone has their own schedule. It's better to just like establish that there.
And have everyone present to discuss it.
And even if you can't discuss it then, like right then, exchange contact information, join a Discord group, meetup group, Facebook group, exchange phone numbers for texting.
And hey, for everyone out there who is paranoid about, oh, I don't want this random stranger to have my phone number, Google Voice numbers are free.
Is this true?
And you can text through them. And it will work on your regular phone. It will pop up as a message in Google Voice on your phone, just like a text message to your main number.
We are in a modern world with a lot of different ways to communicate with each other. Scheduling has murdered millions of good games just because people couldn't coordinate well. We live in the 21st century. We can at least do better than the 80s.
You can at least return a text.
Right? I mean, how do we organize scheduling recording the podcast? I am looking at our private channel in the How We Roll Discord server as we record this.
And we say, we can do this time or this time.
We use meetup.com to coordinate that. And if not, we put that also in the Discord. And then we contact people either over Discord or over the phone, that we do know the phone numbers, or DMs over across Meetup or Discord.
Now, for a safe, happy, and healthy gaming experience, also remember that your players are not going to be beholden to show up just because you scheduled. There may still be a one-off schedule conflict. And so that's fine. Accommodate that. Now, if they no-show every single time, then you've got a problem. But be relaxed about, if Robert can't make it to a Walking Dead game, that's fine. I can come up with a way to move his character off stage for the session. We
And
just
honestly,
ran into that this past weekend with my Star Wars Rebel Yell game.
You know, Daryl, I think that's a good idea for a potential episode of ours.
Shuffling players off?
Dealing with
absent players.
That's what I meant.
Players or more broadly, retooling sessions when things aren't ideal.
I am once again having deja vu for this past weekend's Rebel Yell game.
Well, then you have content for the next session down the line.
Yes.
The main idea here is that scheduling in the past would be like, oh, I didn't my voicemail is overflowing. I wasn't there to pick up the pay phone. The mail lost it. It's like, we live in a modern era. We can communicate with each other way easier. Just be amenable and accepting that sometimes things don't go right. It's not a means by which to end a prospectively great experience for you and your players.
No, and that about sums up scheduling. I mean, there's not much to the scheduling point, but the scheduling point is an important one.
It's sort of a overarching thing that glory stories that don't exist because scheduling fell through are in the millions, and those are the real tragedies.
Mm-hmm. But I think we've hit everything. Is there anything that either of you have thought of that we want to include in the manifesto?
Well, I do have some problems with the Industrial Revolution, but someone else said it better.
Well, I think we are good then. Now,
I think we're good to leave it here.
Unfortunately, we have recorded this to audio and to video rather than scrawling it in barely legible handwriting on many, many pages of a dollar store journal. We may have done this whole manifesto thing wrong.
It's okay. We'll get the secretary to write it up.
Okay.
Wait, I thought we were supposed to record this onto slate.
No, you just scribble it. You scribble in the journal.
You gotta have a few coffee stains here and there.
I think we did a great job of explaining the importance of Assassin Zero, as well as our, I wouldn't say improving our version of the Assassin Zero. There's no true, proper Assassin Zero.
It's largely going to depend on the group, but big picture, you want to hit those points.
And we gave our addendum and flavor to it.
Right, and if you've got the time in your session 0 to throw that little first mini adventure in, I heartily recommend it, because
we may be anecdotal, but it has worked out well for us.
Or if you have an idea of what you want to do afterwards, try it out, see if it works for you.
Yeah.
In fact, put that in a comment or any other interaction.
Or you could send us an email about it at podcast@howwerollgaming.com, and it could be something that we include in a future episode where we say, this listener had this awesome idea for inclusion in a session 0, and we're going to add it into our session 0s going forward to see how it works.
Or if you had a positive experience using this base method or our method as well, include that in an email message, and we could discuss that.
Right?
Exactly.
Or not just email, you can check out our website at howwerollgaming.com, and there not only will you have that way to contact us through email, there's a contact form, you'll find links to all of our socials, information about our current campaigns, and a link to our merch store that will help us keep producing the podcast, help defray some of those costs there, because it's a capitalist society. What you gonna do?
Also, feel free to comment and share our YouTube channel.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe on the YouTube. Do all the YouTube things.
It helps us to defeat the true antagonist of all things, the algorithm.
Ooh, the algorithm. I'm scared. I'm scared, Nick.
It changes just as much as we do.
And if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, topics you'd like us to cover, or just submit an RPG glory story or an example based on a topic that we've talked about, shoot us an email at that email address that I mentioned, which is podcast@howwerollgaming.com.
Or any cool ideas and concepts, and we'll totally not steal them and use them later.
Or if you have your own glory stories, we may share them in an episode down the line.
Yep, but that is it for this episode. We will let you get back to everyday life, just as we are about to get back to everyday life. I don't want to go. I want to stay in the RPGs.
We still have to sign off.
Yep, we do.
People.
So, thanks for listening again, and as always, I am Daryl.
I'm Nick.
And I am Robert.
And this is How We Roll.